Do they have to bring in tankers to replenish the tank farm? And can they do that in 24 hours?
So I think last time around, they did refill the tank farm after the abort on the 17th, and I think it it appeared that it was like kind of a required thing that they have that much loss in propellant, probably specifically with liquid oxygen that they needed to, um, you know, replenish the tank farm. But I think most of that was kind of due to the fact that they were also working with some issues on the booster QD and the hydraulic power unit on the booster. So as far as what we have been able to tell, it seems like they have enough propellant in those tank farms for 2.5 launches. So theoretically, they should not need to replenish. And I guess another thing we found out recently, thanks to that Fish and Wildlife report, was related to how much water they're using. So they have about 360,000 gallons of water for that the active flame deflector system, and I guess they only use about 136,000 gallons during a launch attempt. So theoretically, if they turn on the engines at what is it, T minus 2 seconds or something like that, and they end up having an abort, that water system will already be active. So uh, theoretically, you could have to worry about having to refill the water tanks, but I guess we are now a little bit more certain that that won't be an issue, since they should have about 2.5 launches worth of water in those tanks. So, during an actual abort, I think it's not impossible at this point that we could expect to see another opportunity tomorrow. So, fingers crossed that we don't have to actually worry about that.
And on the official timeline that SpaceX published, the next event is not until the final 10 seconds when the flame deflector that we were just talking about will be activated. But Zach, you were saying, as you were looking at some of the previous fueling attempts and static fires, that there's the ground gas purge event that's going to come up before then. About how far out from T0 is that going to happen?
So it should be as soon as propellant loading ends. It'll actually look like they started loading fuel again. So what they do is once they finish loading fuel on the ship and booster, they'll actually empty all of the propellant lines that are easily drainable. So there's some that are on the actual GSE arm on the tower. All of that, they have a vent that they can open up and purge all of the liquid oxygen, and same thing on the launch mount. And so after that, they'll actually switch over both the liquid oxygen and liquid methane pumps over to pumping nitrogen, and essentially push that all the way through the system, all the way up to the top of the tower, the top of the launch mount. And you'll actually see them push all of that fluid, at least on the oxygen side, you'll see them push all of that out of the tower and the launch mount. And I think that'll probably, it's tough to say because the wet dress rehearsal didn't go all the way to T minus 0 or T0, but I don't know. I want to say it's probably within the last 2 minutes. So we'll probably be able to revise that a little bit after this launch. Because the first time they tested it on the wet dress rehearsal.
Gotcha. Appreciate the insight.
It was confirmed, by the way, that all three of the inner gimbaled engines on Starship would gimbal away at stage step, so they'll all fire up, which is what I thought they might do. So, the other thought I had was that it might be 3 vacuums just to get the initial separation going, but it sounds like all 6.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to that, Marcus. T minus 12 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. We are getting right down to it, coming up on the last 10 minutes here. Want to quickly look at the super chats that have come in and thank a few more folks for supporting our coverage this morning. James G from the Lab Padre stream with a $20 Australian dollar super chat. Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate your support this morning. Marilyn Morgan with a very generous $50 super chat on the Padre stream. Thank you so much, Marilyn. Happy to have you aboard with us this morning. I hope you're enjoying the sights and very soon the many sounds of Starship going up in just a little over 11.5 minutes. Moving on down the road here, Scat 1975 with a 10 pound sterling super chat. Thank you so much, 1975 says, big love to all the nerds, lab, and RGV crew. Yes, it's been great to work here on the ground with the folks at Lab Padre. Really appreciate the partnership, and also want to just thank again Marcus, Zach, and Steven for being generous with their time this morning as we get ready for launch. Stan J with a
No
$10
problem.
super chat with just a rocket and a fire emoji as we're all getting fired up for the launch of Starship, just about 10.5 minutes away from now. See if I can get a few more in here. Perpetual Nerd with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much from the Lab Padre stream. Says, thanks for the live coverage. Wouldn't miss it. And glad you are here and not missing it. It should be quite an event should they be able to launch this morning. And of course, as John mentioned from SpaceX, they may hold at T-minus 40 seconds, and they do have a 20-minute window. So if the count does pause at that point, never fear, this is not a Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy launch. The commitment to the start of fueling does not mean that they have to stand down. Also want to give another quick thanks as I'm recognizing some of the folks supporting us, Sapphire Condominiums, as well as Isla Grande Beach Resort. Really appreciate that, as we've been getting some great views from north of our position on South Padre Island. Our Adam Bernstein and Chief are also up there getting some of those views for us. If we could bring up the Sapphire view, Stephen, if you wouldn't mind, just to give folks an idea of what that'll look like. Yeah, this is from north of our position here. We are pretty much due west of the orbital launch mount where we're sitting here at the Raptor Roost. Looking forward to launch. T-minus 9 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Go through a few more super chats briefly, and then we'll get back into the conversation. Brian Steele with a $15 Australian dollar super chat. Thank you so much. Says, let's get this bad boy up. 2 thumbs up. Wholeheartedly agree. Christopher Sean with a €10 super chat. No comment, but appreciate the support, Christopher. Thank you.
Over 9 minutes from liftoff as the countdown clock clicks to 0. The teams, good news is, teams aren't working any significant issues on the launch vehicle right now. Propellant loading is continuing on both the Super Heavy and the ship stages. Most recently, we began loading LOX and methane fuel into the header tanks on the Starship. And on the graphic on the left side of the screen, you can see up in the nose of the second stage, what we call Starship, are those 2 header tanks for fuel and liquid oxygen. Now that loading started at T-minus 24 minutes and will continue until approximately T-minus 5.5 minutes. Now Starship's second stage main fuel and LOX tanks are loaded for flight. And the second stage propellant that we're loading on board is going through the quick disconnect that comes out on the arm that's located at the base of the stage from the tower. Now on the Super Heavy booster, propellant loading will continue until T-minus 3 minutes. We've also configured the pad for liftoff. A little earlier in the count, the hold downs, the booster hold downs were commanded to unlatch. That means once the rocket has sufficient thrust to overcome its weight, it'll lift off the pad. There's no need to command the hold downs to release the rocket. As we mentioned earlier also, the ignition sequence has been slightly modified from the last flight for a more efficient liftoff. As a reminder, we ignite the engines a few seconds before T0. We don't lift off exactly at T0. We lift off a few seconds later, a couple seconds. Finally, the SpaceX team continues to check in with the Coast Guard to ensure there are no boats in the safety perimeter before proceeding with launch out over the Gulf of Mexico. Now, currently, we're coming up T-minus 7 minutes, 10 seconds to the test flight of Starship. Propellant loading is continuing on both stages of Starship. We're waiting now for the completion of loading of the header tanks in the next few minutes. The first stage is also beginning pressurization for flight while we are continuing to load propellant into it. And again, booster propellant load will finish at approximately T-minus 3 minutes. At that stage, both first and second stages are fully loaded, and we'll have the 10 million pounds of liquid propellant on board the 2 stages of Starship. In the next few minutes, the guidance system will perform its final alignment. We'll get the automated flight termination system that'll arm, and the final TVC checkout will be performed. We may get a view looking up at the engines as we gimbal the 13 middle engines to check them out just before liftoff at about T-minus 90 seconds. If we need to hold, it would come at T-minus 40 seconds. That's the point in the countdown where we can pause to wait for final checkouts or pressurization to complete. Or as we're hearing right now, we're still working a few boats in the area that are headed south. And a lot of cheering here in Hawthorne. The boats are heading south, but we are still planning to hold at T-minus 40 seconds if necessary.
Just amazing views of today's launch. There's nothing
Well,
quite
sounds like
right.
that's the end of John Ensbacher's update from SpaceX. A lot of good information there. Stephen, as we've encountered, certainly covering launches from the Cape, pesky boats in the water are certainly something that we are not fond of seeing, and it's much more of an intrusive item because the fueling has started and the boats haven't cleared the area. They have no margin for error with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, but fortunately they can't hold at T-minus 40 seconds. So that's good news if needed, right?
Yeah, exactly right, Will. They have a 20-minute launch window to work with this morning, so they can hold at 40 seconds, I presume, for all 20 minutes if necessary. I'm not sure if there's any limitation on that, but how long they can hold at that point. But they do have that 20-minute launch window to work with, and if the boats are heading in the right direction, we may or may not see a launch at 7, but hopefully we'll see one sometime between 7 and 7:20.
Yeah, and Zach, we've been talking about some of the differences between Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and Starship. As John also mentioned, because of the way that Starship launches, unlike Falcon mission, they don't need to issue a hold down release. The Starship is capable of doing that all on its own. What else jumped out from you in the latest update from SpaceX?
Yeah, I mean, that has always been an interesting thing to me that we found out at the last launch, which was, that releasing those hold down clamps early. I guess we always kind of thought they would be, ignition, release the hold down clamps. But I guess, having just the sheer weight of the vehicle sitting on those clamps is about enough, all you need. It kind of makes sense, you don't want any possible risk of failure of that. So release them as early as possible and essentially just let the vehicle lift off the pad without having anything holding it down. So, that's going to be really awesome to see once again. I do think it's interesting having those boats out there in the exclusion zone, which doesn't really surprise me. I think some people are probably trying to get out there to the recovery zone, which I would maybe advise against because you never know what this thing is going to do once it's in the air. But yeah, I mean, it seems like everything is good to go. I can tell right now they have finished loading propellant on both the ship and booster. They just finished purging the launch tower, it seems like. So I would say they're finished at least on the ship for sure. I can't really tell on the booster because there's a lot of fog going here, but yeah, we're getting really close right now. It's time to get excited.
Absolutely. And Marcus, did anything else that we haven't already touched on jump out at you? I know you've been able to listen a little more keenly and through both John's updates on fueling as well as some of the SpaceX general commentary.
No, look, not particularly. That hasn't already been covered. They're obviously going right now through various explanations of how big the ship is and why this is important and all this kind of stuff. They've got a great animation of Mechazilla, like an animated Mechazilla coming over, walking past. So these cool sort of insights that they're sharing for those that probably aren't as closely up to speed with what this all means, which is great for the general public. This is why we want people to be interested.
Absolutely. And speaking of interested, we see, as you mentioned, the little hard to see through the venting there, but might be doing the gimbling on those center engines. A little hard to tell if there is in fact motion. Now T-minus 1 minute 27 seconds and counting. Again, they may hold at T-minus 40 seconds, but all things being equal, gentlemen, we are closing in on the last couple of minutes before Starship heads off.
Yeah, they're
Briefly,
just moving the engines now.
there you go. 10 seconds around the horn to each of you. We'll start with Marcus, then go to Zach, then to Steven. Final thoughts as we enter in the last minute of the count, quickly.
Yeah, look, I've got everything crossed. This is incredibly important, and you know, we just need this to clear the tower. Zach, what do you think?
As we're coming up on T-minus 1 minute, when we get to T-minus 40 seconds, we'll just listen in. Last time, as you recall, we did hold at 40 seconds, but it took a few seconds for the clock to recover. So we're going to watch that. And as we press to T0, we're going to watch and listen the second test flight of Starship.
Yeah, I guess really quick. You know, I'm excited for this. I think this is a big day. If this goes well, we're air holding.
Anticipation.
Yeah.
So let's go to the brief hold. Our countdown clock is moving forward.
Still coming down.
All right, we're 10,
T-minus 30 seconds.
8, 7, 6,
Back
5,
around 3 seconds.
4, 3. Okay, the clock is not accurate. It may actually be in a hold. Okay.
Looks like they're going back to 41.
All right. So the hold was called. It looked like it came on, came off, and is back on again.
Looks like it. Whew.
Got me excited there for a second.
I know, we were counting down.
Back at
Sounds like,
Hawthorne,
wait,
we're
hang
at
on.
T-minus 40 seconds in holding. We had a rapid recycle. We've not heard anything over the countdown net as the team works both first and second stages. We're going to monitor the nets here for a minute.
All right. So we are, as it appeared, in a holding pattern. Of course, just as a reminder for anyone who may have joined in the live streams here, either on the Lab Padres side or the
Got a little bit of an
Spaceflight Now
update.
side.
We're continuing to hold at T-minus 40 seconds. This is the normal hold point for Starship, as we talked earlier. Sounds like we're working just late pressurization on, I believe, the second stage. Team is working it. All the other systems are on hold right now at 40 seconds. We can hold here for about 15 minutes or so before we would run out of window for this morning. So right now they're working on filling pressure vessels. And ideally we'll be able to solve this and come back and release the clock at T-minus 40 seconds. We're going to continue to listen and monitor for another few minutes.
Come on.
So hearing from John that, of course, the hold is something that they planned for, that they have time for, not infinite time.
And
As you mentioned,
it's
they
worth
have about
mentioning here that
15
don't go
minutes
away.
that
We
they
are
can
holding.
hold. So we will continue to keep eyes on, and of course, if John Isbacher pops back in with an update, we will listen to that and talk about any of the pertinent updated information. But at this point, we expect any updates from SpaceX to be obviously very pertinent to the launch attempt here, hopefully sooner rather than later.
We're counting down.
The SpaceX got before. Oh, we have ignition
Yes.
and liftoff of the Starship rocket on its second integrated flight test.
My gosh.
This is quite the sight as Starship takes the skies for just the second time. Let's listen in.
Go, go, go. Yes. Look at all those engines. Every one of them's on. Yes.
Now a little over a minute in flight.
Come on.
Starship continues to climb. We're looking towards booster and main engine cutoff at T plus 2 minutes, 39 seconds. That'll set up the hot staging at T plus 2 minutes, 41 seconds. The milestone SpaceX was not able to reach last time. Let's see if they can pull it off this time. As the sun comes up over the horizon.
This is amazing. Amazing.
Spectacular liftoff of the Starship integrated launch vehicle for just the second time. You can still see the brightly burning Raptor engines at the bottom of the super heavy booster. Getting some great tracking views from our team here on the ground, toggling between us and SpaceX views.
This is just flawless.
All 33 Raptor engines are still ignited according to the SpaceX graphic here. You see there on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Now about to cross 5,000 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
Oh. That
Come
looks
on.
like it was Vigo. And we appear to have a successful stage separation. The hot
My
staging
gosh.
does appear to have been successful as the super heavy booster 9 now making its way down for a splashdown in the Gulf of
Wow.
Mexico. Ship 25 continuing on its trajectory.
Looks like a few engines are out though.
Did they just lose the booster?
Oh,
We may have lost the booster there. Let's see. Still see a dot on the horizon there.
wow.
Now a few minutes into flight.
This is a great win though.
Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, as we continue to watch this flight go on, just briefly, let's go around the horn, starting with Stephen. If you could talk about what we've been able to see so far and what are your thoughts about this flight profile at this point in time?
Really impressive. I think that seeing all 33 engines firing throughout the boost burn of the Super Heavy, that was a huge thing to see, a big step forward. Hot staging appeared to work as designed. That was really impressive. It was very obvious to see here visually. And I think they may have lost the booster. It looked like it did explode during that boost back burn or shortly after the boost back burn. But the ship still going down range. I think I've lost a visual of it, but any update there?
Yeah, checking the SpaceX feed to see sort of where things stand. We're at T plus 5 minutes, 10 seconds. They do still have tracking views of ship from the ground traveling at a speed of about 3,800 kilometers per hour at an altitude of 90 kilometers. So ship still flying, and you can see here on your screen.
Yeah,
path
past 11,000.
So assuming all continues nominally for ship, we very well may see a splashdown off the coast of Hawaii as was intended for the nominal flight profile of this part of the mission. So while we had a bit of a hiccup with the booster, I've still got quite a bit for SpaceX to be extremely proud of. Zach, how are you feeling about, getting to see the big item that we were watching for? We saw hot staging carry on successfully, and now ship is sailing.
Man, I would say that was insanely impressive. Like, you can't ask for a better improvement on the first flight than that. Obviously, we're gonna have to wait and see what the pad looks like, but I mean, man, that booster performed flawlessly. I guess I wasn't really watching the actual live stream on SpaceX's side, but I guess they have had all 33 engines the entire time. So, man, going from having 3 engines out on the last static fire to having all 33 that time and reaching stage separation, I mean, that thing jumped off the pad. Wow. I mean, you can't really ask for a better second launch than that. Obviously, it did seem like we lost the booster, but, who cares? As long as the ship gets to continue on, at least they're getting data on the ship this time. So, I guess on my side, the only sad part about losing the booster is, I think that means that's going to push out one extra launch for when we should expect to see like the first attempt of them trying to catch the booster with the integration tower. But that's okay. We're making progress, and this is I'm sure the SpaceX team is really excited right now.
Want to note where we are in the count. It's T plus 7 minutes 21 seconds. The next milestone that we're expecting here is Starship engine cutoff at T plus 8 minutes 33 seconds. But by the graphic on the bottom of the SpaceX feed, it appears that all 6 engines on ship are continuing to burn nominally from our perspective. And as Stephen noted, ship has crossed the Kármán line, so SpaceX has now reached space with ship for the first time. Pretty big milestone, Marcus.
Yeah, look, we're past 22,000. We're nearly there. You can see just how little propellant there is left. This is designed to only just get there. So again, we're very curious to see if it can just get to that designated spot.
Marcus, I'm a bit out of the loop. Is this are they winning with the first
Engine shutdown.
engine to orbit?
Engine shutdown there. Hopefully it was planned. It looks like it. Sorry, Zach, what was that?
So I'm a little out of the loop. You would know this better than me. Is Starship now the first Methalox rocket in orbit, or did China beat them? I'm not sure.
Yeah, China sort of had one, but I mean, this is actually arguably orbital. I've always argued this is still kind of orbital, but this is all looking great. They're just saying, yeah.
As you can tell by the excitement from the crowd here at Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, there's a great view of our Star Command Center. That's our control center at Starbase Texas. The crowd here, Mission Control Center behind us in Hawthorne. Everyone is super exciting. What a successful day this has been so far.
Well, I mean, it was supposed to be a little early, but I don't know how early. I would have thought it would have been just a little faster.
Yeah, it looked like it came about
And I mean,
8
up
minutes,
to this point,
17 seconds
major
into flight,
successful
was
milestones
just
through
about
hot
15
staging, which
seconds
was the
early.
big objective today.
We'll see how much that may or may not impact the rest of the flight of ship.
So
Just awaiting
we are going to
acquisition of
head
signal.
into the coast phase, planned for the next about hour and 5 minutes. We'll be returning around the T plus 1 hour and 15-minute mark. And that's while we're waiting for Starship to continue on to its next step for reentry. We're not totally sure what video we're going to get, and that video comes normally by overflying ground stations, but we don't have a ton along our flight path. So fingers crossed that we will get some via Starlink on this mission since we're testing that out.
Of course, we certainly hope that we'll be able to see some of those onboard views of
And also give us
Starship.
a moment. We are hearing some chatter on the net, so we're going to try to parse that for you.
Stand by for those updates. Of course, we'll pause as SpaceX briefs on the status of ship as it continues to fly. Now approaching 11 minutes into flight. Certainly a lot of excitement here at the Raptor Roost, as we certainly saw what appeared to be a very successful liftoff through staging, sailing on a
Dude, that's
Sailing on a
straight
ship here.
flawless.
The actual booster part of it was just amazing. The stage separation was amazing. All of it was amazing.
John Innsbrucker
Obviously,
back here in
excluding the
Hawthorne
booster.
at our web.
hold up.
Wow.
We have lost
I
the
might need
data
that
from
video
the
for this.
second stage. We had heard a call out that we were internal guidance, which means we were getting near the end of the approximately 6-minute burn of Starship. But we haven't gotten any more data since then. So we think we may have lost the second stage. So we would not be into coast phase. We wouldn't be able to come back in an hour or so and possibly get ready for reentry. However, what we do know right now is we had an on-time launch at 7 o'clock. We got through the boats. First stage looked beautiful with 33 Raptor engines firing. We got the hot staging, you know, the thing that we really wanted to see and impressed. We saw the separation. We saw the flip maneuver. We saw the light up of the 6 Raptor engines on Starship, and it headed away. Everything really looked good. But what we do believe right now is that the automated flight termination system on second stage appears to have triggered very late in the burn as we were headed downrange out over the Gulf of Mexico. But the real topping on the cake today, that successful liftoff, Kate, Shiva, the hot staging is just beautiful. Exactly what we were looking for.
Yeah, ultimately, honestly, such an incredibly successful day. Even though we did have a RUD or a rapid unscheduled disassembly of both the
And bringing it back to our commentary here. So it sounds like ship did not make it beyond the Gulf of Mexico. So both first and second stages staying not too terribly far away from where they lifted off just a little bit after 7 o'clock this morning. Thoughts around the horn here, gentlemen, on the flight as we know it. Having seen where IFT1 got to now with IFT2 in the books, what are kind of your overall thoughts as far as where the Starship program is and where do we head next? Zach, we'll start with you, go to Marcus, and then to Stephen.
You know, I'm really excited. I think this was a major milestone. You know, I think one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to right now is just to see how fast they try to do this again. So, you know, we know they're cleared for 5 launches a year, and the year is almost over. So if I was them, I would maybe try and get the next vehicle up there as quickly as possible. So I would not at all be surprised to see a launch in December. But as far as we know, you know, they haven't actually announced any plans of that. You know, they're just trying to get through this. But man, that was pretty amazing. You know, losing the vehicle, losing both vehicles, you know, kind of sad, but you know, making it through those major milestones that they did, getting way past what they did at the you know, IFT1. I think you know, we're well on our way to seeing some really great things in the future from Starship.
Yeah, look, it's just mind-boggling to me. The thing that we want to see now is how well that plate is held up. As long as we don't see any damage or any people rushing in there to try to start repairing things, I think that this has been an amazing success because we had the full, we had the full launch there. All 33 Raptor engines, as far as I could see, it was lifting off with about the thruster weight that I would expect. So that's a really great sign. And the fact that it got through hot staging, we didn't see any engine die at all until after the booster had separated, and there was obviously a problem there. And we saw them collectively dropping out quite rapidly, actually, before it blew up. So that was probably more something to do with various pressures and sloshing of fuels and propellants and all that sort of thing, I would guess. But the fact that the Starship made it all that way, we didn't see those engines flicker once. Something's obviously happened at the end there. I don't know whether it shut down or whether it sounds like it was probably it had triggered the FTS for some reason. But the fact that it got that far, I mean, I would have been thrilled to see it go past stage set, but getting almost, or very, very close there to orbital velocity, 24,000 is very, very close. Only a few more seconds and they would have had that. So not sure what happened there, but it's amazing. I'm absolutely ecstatic about it.
Stephen, getting to be up close with this launch as we were for IFT1. This is my first time seeing Starship launch in person. It was quite something, and as you mentioned, it was even more impactful, I think, as far as just a sheer noise and rumble environmental impact compared to SLS over at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. What was your takeaway from both seeing it launch and just the point at which it got to in its flight?
It was great to see it, with clear skies. That was a big thing. The difference between this launch and the one in April is we saw it for more than 20 seconds. And I was looking through my viewfinder on my camera with a 600 millimeter lens, maybe 30-40 seconds after launch, and I could see through the viewfinder that all 33 engines were firing. And I was like, that's a really good sign. If it's 40 seconds in, all 33 engines firing, means it got off the pad with all 33 firing, and it looks like all 33 were burning for the full duration on the booster until that hot staging event. And we were able to track Starship downrange for 5 or 6 minutes, I think, until it kind of flew into the sun glare. And this, SpaceX has to walk away from this feeling really good, because they achieved a lot today. It'll be interesting, like Zach was talking about a few minutes ago, where they go from here. Do they kind of rush one of the vehicles, not rush, but move one of the vehicles they have in flow out to the pad and just redo this flight profile again in a matter of weeks or a couple of months? Or do we see a vehicle for the third flight test that has some more evolution to it, that maybe can carry a payload into orbit and perhaps go all the way to orbital velocity, to a stable orbit, rather than doing this intentional trajectory just shy of orbital velocity with a splashdown in Hawaii? So I think SpaceX has, probably has some ideas of what they're doing next, but they haven't really shared that. But it'll be, they got to be, like I said, they have to be feeling really confident after this, because I think the Starship era is here at this point, you can safely say. And, they are, for a matter of 15-20 seconds from reaching their planned velocity. And things like that. It looks like they had data all the way up until the flight termination system triggered, so they can probably have data once they analyze it of what caused the FTS to trigger, and whether that was an engine problem or a guidance problem or something. We'll see. But I think they have data throughout that profile to know exactly what went right and exactly what may have gone wrong toward the end of Starship's burn.
And certainly NASA is very eager to take a look at that data, since it got so much further, and that'll really help inform Lisa Watson-Morgan and her team with the HLS program in the capabilities and the capacity of Starship, as they need to see how it performs and how it evolves before you get to even close to introducing the human element.
Yeah, exactly right. And from NASA's perspective, they wanted to see a successful orbital flight test. Not sure if this meets every box of that for their requirement. They do have a data architecture review between NASA and SpaceX coming up after this flight test, and where they'll go over all the objectives and see if that meets the requirement for that milestone in the HLS contract. If it does, the next thing that NASA really cares about is the propellant transfer. Getting the Starship into orbit, first for a tank-to-tank transfer within one Starship vehicle, and then later on a ship-to-ship propellant transfer, which is a whole different level of complexity of bringing two Starships together in orbit. And to do that, you probably need 2 launch pads active, either 2 here or here in Florida, here and Florida. We'll see how that shakes out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zach, if you're still on the mic with us, you know, one of the things that we were talking about as a watch item, and certainly something that, you know, we felt pretty good about coming into this, was going to be the performance of the infrastructure around Starship. Didn't really get a lot of good sort of pointing down views of the pad from here, especially after liftoff. But, you know, from the lack of a giant cloud of concrete and debris, it seems like the upgrades to the infrastructure, especially the launch pad, really stood up to Starship and its power.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just like still taking all this in. You know, I think hopefully we will get some views of the pad. I think the fact that we didn't see concrete flying through the air is a good sign. You know, that I think we're probably good to go. You know what I mean? Like, you know, obviously they're probably gonna do some analysis on the actual result on the pad, but you know, I think it ideally could be a quick turnaround. Everything went as well as it looks like it did. I mean, I remember last time, you know, at this point we're still seeing smoke coming out of off of the launch mount and the, you know, the surrounding areas, and it looks clean right now. You know, I don't see any remaining smoke or anything like that. You know, this is a night and day difference from the first launch, that's for sure.
It's
Yeah,
definitely
Marcus.
much improved. I'm looking at various replays from so many cameras to try to nail this. I mean, it looks like there is some debris. Like, there's not no debris, there is some debris, and we're just trying to figure out what it is. It looks like most of it is light stuff that is probably immaterial. There was quite a couple of little hefty chunks of something that did go flying at some point, but if anything, I would hope that that's probably outer concrete from outside the steel plate system. If anything, that's probably a worst case scenario in my very amateur opinion right now. So yeah, there was a little bit of stuff flying, but certainly absolutely night and day between the first launch. I think this was incredibly successful.
Yeah, and Marcus, you know, now that we sort of have a gauge of, you know, what SpaceX was able to accomplish, obviously very preliminary, just sort of seeing with our own eyes. We don't have, you know, hard data to really mine at this point. But going to Stephen's point earlier, how do you imagine SpaceX is going to be looking at its next test flight of Starship? Do you think they might push to the point of trying to reach true orbital velocity and get to that stage, or do you think they may try to repeat the same flight profile of this mission and get to the point where, you know, we go through a fully successful launch profile that they were attempting for today?
Yeah, look, I think given that they really didn't make it to orbit, as far as we can tell, or, you know, to their designated target, because it wasn't quite orbital anyway, it was going to be just shy of it. But considering it didn't get there, they've really got no data on how well that engine cutoff would have been had it have been the proper planned one, and anything like that. They're certainly not going to have any re-entry data on how it was able to be controlled. So I don't see that they would have much more choice but to try to repeat the similar sort of flight. If anything, I think that the booster explosion, that's, if anything, is going to raise flags. It'd be, okay, why did that happen and how dangerous was it? There's probably going to need to be a report done on that event before they're happy to let it go again, because remember, this isn't just flying to stage SEP, it's coming back quite close to land, and they intended for this to come back eventually and land at the tower. So they're probably going to want a good idea on what happened there with the booster primarily. And apart from that, as long as that pad's held up well and we don't see any significant damage to it, I don't see why this couldn't be flying again pretty quickly. I'd probably be skeptical to say. I suspect there's probably still going to need to be a typical anomaly investigation, maybe with the booster, but I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, that was going to be sort of where I wanted to take the conversation next, which is what comes next. Start with you, Zach. I mean, having the opportunity to read through a good bit of the documents from both the FAA and FWS. Obviously, there will need to be a mishap investigation to really thoroughly learn what happened and allow the FAA to be comfortable with SpaceX going for flight number 3. Given that there wasn't the level of pad destruction, and more than likely we're not going to see sort of greater infrastructure upgrades needed to support another launch, just maybe some changes to the rocket itself. I know it's sort of speculative at this point, but what are you gauging as a possible or probable timeline before we could see this fly again?
Well, you know, the infrastructure upgrades aren't necessarily needed, but as far as what we know, they're the stage 0 team has been sitting around waiting for probably about 2 to 3 months so they can start getting to work, because they have about 9 horizontal cryogenic storage tanks that should be installed here shortly. They have they're about to double the capacity of the tank farm as far as propellant loading speed. So they have currently, I think it's three liquid oxygen pumps and 2 liquid methane pumps, and they're going to be jumping up to 5 liquid oxygen and 4 methane pumps, and they're also adding in the additional heat exchangers for that as well too. So I think they're going to want to get those upgrades in as quickly as possible. You know, they, like I said, have been waiting around to be able to do that. So I think that could be a limiting factor, like how quickly they're able to do that. But as far as the actual like ground testing campaign, we know that they're only going to do 2 static fires potentially, if even that, like at least 1 static fire for the booster. You know, the ground testing campaign should be way faster than it has been at any other, you know, from the first launch to this launch. I think it's not unrealistic for a month or 2, but as you were saying, you know, that mishap investigation or whatever is probably going to be the bigger limiting factor than infrastructure or the actual vehicle itself.
Yeah, and
I think the great thing's been those engines, though, like those 33. NASA was there. We've already heard this. NASA was there to really make sure that they were improving on that reliability of the engines. And you know, with the exception of the booster coming back there and starting to lose out, it just seems the launch itself was flawless, absolutely flawless as far as I can see.
Agreed. Incredible, absolutely incredible.
yeah, and Stephen, to bring it back into the conversation here, you know, really the FAA has been quite busy over the last year with a whole host of mishap investigations, whether you're talking about Blue Origin's New Shepard vehicle, obviously the big one with Starship. I think probably Terran 1 with Relativity Space is still in the works as far as we know. Given that a number of some of the larger mishap investigations are off the docket for the FAA, given the limitations of their workforce as it currently stands, unless Congress comes in and offers them more financial support, how much do you think some of the other investigations may hamper or hinder them being able to really get running with this one and really start to get to work and look towards another flight?
Well, I think it'll go faster this time, because I think the environmental piece of the review won't be as extensive, if required at all, because as far as we can tell, we don't have eyes on the pad right up at the launch mount right now, but everything looks like it weathered the storm pretty well when this rocket lifted off. So they're not going to have to do any major modifications or changes out at the pad. So I think there still will be that safety review during that mishap investigation, but the environmental piece, which is what was holding up this license for the last number of weeks, month or two, may not be required this time. So the FAA is obviously going to want to know, but if the FTS flight termination system was activated on both the booster and the ship, we know it was activated on the ship. It may have been activated on the booster. That's certainly going to require some scrutiny from the FAA. They're going to want to be involved in that mishap investigation. But I think it'll be primarily focused on the public safety and not the environmental aspects that what were the final things that held up this launch date.
Yeah, that's the perfect answer, I think.
I was just gonna ask, to that point, do you think that even though there's not the environmental component to this, that they may be able to step through it quickly, as it seemed, just looking at the mishap on New Shepard, obviously very different vehicle intended to be suborbital, but that mishap investigation, even though there didn't necessarily need to be a full environmental review on that one, but that one lasted well over a year before that one wrapped up. In your estimation, what do you think would allow this mishap investigation to move faster and hopefully get to a second flight, or excuse me, a third flight of Starship by, somewhere in early 2024, not, super late 23?
That's a good point, Will, about the New Shepard investigation taking so long. There's also the ABL investigation that took 8 months, I think 9 months actually, from January till October, I think is when that report came out. And but the most recent failure with Rocket Lab was an upper stage issue, and that has already been cleared, and that was less than 2 months. So maybe that's something to hang your hat on if you're SpaceX. Maybe that's the pace we'll see the mishap investigation go for this launch. But we'll see how things go. I know there's going to be a lot of pressure on the FAA from the public, from SpaceX, from space enthusiasts, SpaceX fans, and perhaps some interagency discussion between NASA and the FAA as well, because one thing we learned from SpaceX, we heard from SpaceX a few weeks ago, was SpaceX not only called for more resources for the FAA to be able to expedite these reviews and licensing, but they also called for there to be a way within the government for the FAA to prioritize programs that are of national importance, such as Starship for Artemis. So we'll see if there's any movement in that regard, to put this at the front of the line.
Yeah, and Marcus, that's a really good point. Obviously, we saw Bill Gerstenmaier up on Capitol Hill alongside colleagues from Blue Origin as well as Virgin Galactic, talking about, principally the subcommittee hearing was over the regulations surrounding commercial human space flight, but SpaceX, and it was joined in by Blue and Virgin Galactic, really discussing and putting pressure on Congress to keep the wheels greased and moving along when it comes to the FAA going through these mishap investigations and trying to keep pace a little bit better with the pace of innovation. Obviously, it'll never be one-to-one because that's not how government works. But do you think, to Stephen's point, that given the importance of Starship, not only to SpaceX's individual ambitions as a singular company, but to the national interests as part of the Artemis architecture, that this may sort of scoot it up a little bit in the timeline of priority?
Yeah, look, the hope is always that it would be prioritized because it is critical for the Artemis missions in going forward, and they've got a long way to go. Getting to orbit's one tiny part of that. Refilling systems is the thing that I'm really quite interested in personally, because these these refilling systems in space are obviously required for any moon mission. And again, we don't have the numbers for the dry mass of this vehicle yet, and that's always going to be very handy for me to be able to see what the performance would be. How much delta V do they need? What sort of orbit do they need to be in before they could actually leave with a fully fueled ship? These are all really interesting questions. We just don't have the data to answer any of these questions or even speculate usefully on them. So what I really feel is that they will probably be accelerated through this process, especially since there's been as far as I can see, there's been no reasonable concerning damage at the site. A bit early to maybe make that claim, but I would think that they'll be very rapidly now getting the upgrades done to the tank farm with the new propellant turbines and whatnot. I think they'll be grabbing the next booster and ship in line, and they'll be testing them rapidly. And all that time, hopefully the FAA are doing any of the research investigations they need to do to allow the next one to fly. I think it'll probably all happen rapidly, but I would assume we're probably not going to see the next one until sometime January would be my guess, maybe February, but it depends. Yeah, depends how quickly. Yeah, I don't know. What's everyone else's thoughts?
Yeah, it all depends. Zach, as we've been talking about throughout the morning, obviously there's a lot of hardware stacked up. To Marcus's point, do you think, obviously once they do a full checkout of the pad and make sure that, the infrastructure is ready to support future testing, that we may see, some hardware start to get back into like full testing swing sooner rather than later? Or do you think it'll be a minute before we start seeing some of those next big milestones?
Well, given the way that they kind of push things with this launch, I would imagine that we may see something similar. Even with an investigation going, they'll probably have Booster 10 sitting on the pad with 2 static fires under its belt, and Elon tweeting out that they're ready for launch pending approval. So, I feel like the past has probably shown us what to expect in that regard. So, yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, Booster 7's been in, or sorry, wow, I'm still stuck on Booster 7. Booster 10 has been in the Mega Bay getting its engines installed for probably the last month or so.
Yeah.
So,
I think.
I would not be surprised to see it roll out like literally before the end of the week. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to mess around at all. I think we are still waiting on static fires for ship 28. So we don't really know if ship 28 or 26 is going to be the next launch vehicle, but as far as all indications that we've seen so far, it's going to be 28. So I would imagine they'll probably want to get going on the static fire campaign for ship 28. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I would not be surprised to see both vehicles on the pad by the end of this coming week.
Well, and
one little thing that I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say one little thing I wouldn't mind clarification on. I've got to go look through all the shots again, but how many heat shield tiles were sort of lost in the launch? Did we see many coming off? That's always a good question in my mind. And also, did we see many views from on board? Did we see any views from on board? I don't think did we?
I will have to go back and look at the feed again. I want to say no, but I obviously don't want to be definitive until we've had a chance to really go back and check the tape. I'm just sort of scrubbing quickly through the live stream here.
Yeah, 0 on board is what some of the people here are saying. So yeah, I didn't spot one. It's a bit hard to focus on everything when you're streaming, but
yeah,
apparently no shots. There was a single shot from Starship while it was on the pad, none in flight. So that's what I thought. I was a little bit interested by that, although I don't think we saw many from the actual last one either until after the fact. So we might see SpaceX tweet out a few shots of stage set cameras. I really hope they do.
I'm sure,
because that'd be amazing. Yeah, that'd be amazing to see.
I mean, that was the biggest thing that they were watching and waiting for. So I can't imagine that they're not going to show that off now that they have it in a real world setting and not just the animation that they released this morning.
Yeah, that's been incredible.
I guess one sort of real world timeline that we can assess, and reaching out to one of our colleagues out in the field, Adam Bernstein, about the timeline for remote pickup. I mean, that'll be a good indication of how things are at the pad. Although it's taking a look out on the horizon, I do see a convoy of vehicles heading back out toward the production site. So it looks like teams are clear to start returning back to some level of normal operations at Starbase. So that's certainly a good indication that things are fairly nominal at the launch site.
Yeah.
We're just taking a look at the launch replay here on your screen.
How many tiles are missing there?
You see at least one dot that could potentially be a missing tile, but it's really hard to tell at vantage point. Hopefully when SpaceX releases some onboard views, there are cameras that are pointing up at ship and not just down at the booster.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of see while they dim those cameras, they sort of reduce the exposure to try to see what's going on with all the engines. But yeah, it was doesn't let you see much about the ship itself, does it?
No, it doesn't. Well, as we go ahead and start to wind down our coverage, going to go ahead and let some of the fellows go as we start to pack things in. So want to thank our guests that have joined us on this stream. Really appreciate the time, the insight, and the great commentary from Marcus House, Zach Golden, and Stephen Clark. Before you fellas depart, if you want to just talk briefly about where folks can keep up with all your great work and maybe talk about, you know, a project that you've got on the horizon. Marcus, we'll start with you and go to Zach and then Stephen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for those that aren't familiar with me, I run a channel where we really just try to cover the weekly snapshot, everything great that happened this week, and we did release those on a Saturday. So single video, typically try to do them 20 minutes long and just try to cover everything fairly concisely. So that's our goal, and trying to make it reasonably technical, but also reasonably basic for those that are a bit new to it. But yeah, it's all just under my name. Google Marcus House, and you'll find me there on YouTube. Absolute pleasure. We're sort of just excruciatingly close to 500,000 subscribers, and I can't quite get there. So yes, anybody that's not subscribed that likes watching what we do, we are right there. But yes, thank you very much for the invite. It's been awesome being here, and seeing all the people in chat from all around the world. Just amazing. It amazes me, this community. It really does. Every time I get to be a part of anything live like this. So yeah, thank you everybody, and thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been talking throughout the morning about the importance of reaching folks throughout the space community, those that are just sort of passing interest, as well as those who are very deep in the weeds and want to know all the technical aspects of the mission. So it's good to have a great diversity of channels, and those like Marcus House are great if you really want to get into the weeds. And as you mentioned, you know, tick off the news of the week. So thanks, Marcus. Going down the horn, Zach Golden with CSI Starbase. Talk a little about the work that you do on your channel, and maybe some of maybe the next video that you've got in the loop. Obviously, I'm sure something very much connected to this launch.
For sure. Yeah, I'm like you said, Zach Golden. I pretty active on both Twitter and well, more Twitter right now than YouTube currently. You know, got some life changes that have been happening, but you know, I really like to kind of cover all of the ins and outs of what's happening, like from a engineering perspective, and you know, tons of speculation. So you'll see lots of speculation from me on Twitter if you follow CSI Starbase on Twitter. But as far as on YouTube, you know, I like to do a lot of in-depth analysis and really try and explain how everything works, because you know, we don't get a lot of information from SpaceX. So I try to you know, really analyze things as in-depth as possible, and you know, with the help of a lot of really amazing 3D artists, and obviously none of the stuff I do would be possible without all the photographers on the ground, and you know, the live stream cameras and all that stuff. So yeah, currently I'm working on a decently long episodes, probably about 45 minutes long, just covering all of the changes that they made with Booster 9 and Ship 25. So it's actually a 2-part episode. We got some really awesome renders and animations for that as well too, because you know, we can say on the live stream that they upgraded the shielding, but you can't really actually get an appreciation for what that looks like until we are able to actually model all that stuff and really show people what was actually changed. So yeah, you know, we're pretty deep into that process. I was actually kind of hoping to get it out yesterday, but obviously I'm down here, so you know, hopefully be on the lookout for that within the next 2 days or so. You know, I'm about to head back home here in a few hours, and get to work on that right away. So yeah, if you guys haven't followed me on or subscribed on YouTube, make sure you do that. Same name on both platforms, CSI Starbase. And yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate being able to be on the actual stream and, you know, cover history in the making. So you know, hopefully I'll be here on the next one as well too. It's you know, just gonna only get more exciting each time.
Well, and it's great to be able to keep coming back, because then we have a reference point, both from, you know, just watching it in the stream, but there's something very, you know, palpable about being in person. So I think that's important to, as much as and as often as we can, make sure that we are live in person, bringing you our experiences as well as building on our own knowledge of what these rockets are like. And there's some things that you can capture much better if you can get a 3D world perspective on it. So thanks to Zach again. If you're not subscribed to both him and Marcus House, be sure to do so on YouTube. And lastly, our Spaceflight Now alumnus, Stephen Clark, joining us again. Very busy over at Ars Technica. Jet setting quite a bit these days. You were just over in Colorado talking on another tiled vehicle, the Dream Chaser from Sierra Space. Briefly, just talk about that trip down there. Obviously, there's a lot happening in space flight, and that's a big one that is also important to NASA.
Yeah, exactly. I was up in the Denver area a few weeks ago to see the first Dream Chaser named Tenacity as it was getting ready to leave the factory, heading from Colorado to NASA's Plum Brook Test Facility in Ohio, where it's going to go through some thermal vacuum testing and some electromagnetic testing over the next couple of months. And then once those tests are done, if they're successful, Sierra Space is going to be shipping that vehicle down to Cape Canaveral to prepare for launch on the second flight of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket. And that's going to be happening probably no earlier than the spring, but we'll see if Vulcan and Dream Chaser are ready. It's kind of a tight schedule, I think, for both of those vehicles to be ready for a second flight in the April timeframe. And so that certainly is an interesting thing to see a space plane in the factory about to leave its nest, heading up to the test facility. And it's going to be really cool to see it land. Even more cool than the launch, I think, will be to see it land back at the Kennedy Space Center on the old shuttle landing facility. And speaking of space planes, another thing, if we're talking about what's coming up, is the launch of the X-37 on the Falcon Heavy in less than a month from the Cape. That's the first flight of the Air Force Space Force X-37 on a Falcon Heavy. So it's led to a lot of speculation about what it's going to be doing on flying on a much bigger rocket than the Atlas V or Falcon 9. I think we'll certainly figure out what kind of orbit it's going into closer to the launch. Once the notice to pilots and mariners come out, we'll have an idea of where it's going to be going. But what it's going to do, who knows? The military doesn't like talking about that. And so that's something else on the horizon, along with preparations for a third Starship flight test. Hope to be back here for that. I would bet it's going to be early next year, but we'll see. And also the first flight of Vulcan on Christmas Eve. So it's going to be a very busy holiday season for space reporters.
It certainly is. So if you wanted the present of space flight, we've certainly got a wealth of that for you on tap. And that Falcon Heavy Pad 39A really very quickly in process, turning over from Falcon 9 configuration to a Falcon Heavy. Still the only pad that SpaceX is launching heavies off of. So they're preparing to take some of the crude and cargo capabilities off the exclusive load of 39A. Looking forward to possibly our first flight with the AX3 crew, maybe in January. We might see that, hopefully.
Yeah, that's another thing I didn't mention is first crew launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station since 1966, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since the last Gemini flight. So launching astronauts from Pad 40 will be really cool to see as well. So yeah, like I said, lots going on, and you can keep track of it with my writing at arstechnica.com. Spaceflight Now, of course, does a great job as well. So plenty of resources to learn about all these things that are coming up.
Awesome. Well, thanks again to Stephen, Zach, and Marcus for joining us throughout, I would say, some pretty banner coverage. Want to go ahead, bring Lab back in as we begin to close out this conversation. Really haven't had the chance to sit down, you and I, since we really got this thing going. Just briefly, what were your overall impressions of the flight profile and what we saw, what we didn't see, and what you're looking forward to in the next one?
Well, I think we all saw what we wanted to see today. We saw that thing take off. We saw it separate. And unfortunately, it didn't make it all the way around to Hawaii. But overall, I think it was a very good, successful day today for SpaceX. you know, we did lose a camera, a Rover 3 cam. I'm not sure exactly why, if it was just a net connection or if we lost it due to any heat. I know there's a lot of heat out there, but yeah, man, it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the combo of Lab Padre spaceflight, now we were able to bring a great experience to our viewers around the world. So it's been a pleasure working with you guys, as we have for quite some time now.
Yes, sir.
Do have a few more super chats to go through if you want to tackle those with me as we get ready to wrap things up. But of course, want to acknowledge the folks that have been supporting us. So we'll pass it back and forth as we thank some of you who have been supporting us throughout the course of this operation.
Yes, sir. We got a Sharpie in with $10 super chat for all the work you do, Lab Padre. Thank you, Sharpie.
Moving on down the road, SG, one of our regulars, joining us for live launch coverage with a $40 super chat. No comment here, but SG just likes to come in with the support, and we really appreciate that. Good to see you as always.
Wow, we have 199.99 USD super chat. Let's go. Thanks for your hard work. That's Bond Urch. Thank you very much for that generous super chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bond Urch. Really appreciate the support. Moving on down, Sven Lutgemeyer. Apologies if I mispronounced that, but with a €5 super chat says, thanks for all your great streams over to Lab Padre, and you guys do some great work.
All right. And we have Calum. He's one of our camera operators for the Gator Cam out at Port Canaveral. 10 pounds, pounds sterling, root beer for commentators to wet their whistles. Thank you, Calum.
Yeah, I'm certainly a mug root beer fan myself, so I think a tall, frosty glass of root beer sounds pretty nice right about now.
Yes, sir.
And we've been using our voices quite a bit.
Yeah.
Moving on down, JK Video with a $10 super chat donation. Thank you so much, JK.
And we have Alan Hart in the house, $49.99. Love the addition of House and Golden to broadcast team. Yes, we love Zach and Marcus House. Love to have them as part of our commentary.
And wasn't part of this particular comment, but also getting to bring Stephen Clark into the fold was definitely a treat. So appreciate him being with us as well. Mutinous Mike with a 10-pound sterling donation. Go Starship, and it sure did go.
Yeah. All right, we have Jim Edgar with $30. Jim Edgar and Lisa Bean have been up all morning in Seattle for the launch. Thank you, Jim, for Jim and Lisa for hanging out with us this morning. Glad y'all got to see what we got to see. What a day.
I know my mom, I made sure she knew when the stream was starting. It was going to be an early morning. She's also on the West Coast in California, so hopefully the launch was enjoyed by folks up and down the West Coast of the United States and around the world as well. Net Lawyer DC with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Net Lawyer. Really appreciate you being with us this morning and for your support.
All right, we have Martha Johnson with $20 super chat. Fly high, Starship. Yes, she did fly. Thank you so much, Martha.
Moving on down here, Kanjo Dan 69 with a $25 super chat. Simple message, but a pertinent one. Let's go.
All right, we have George Nicholas in the house with £49.99 sterling. Great coverage, guys. Thanks also to Marcus for dropping his weekly a day early. Thank you, George.
John Doan with a $20 super chat. This obviously coming in before liftoff or right about liftoff, saying time to rock and roll. And boy, you know, this was the first time I saw Starship launch in person, and I will say that the rocking was certainly well earned by this rocket.
Yes, sir, John. Thank you very much. Also known as Hank Hill, my brother from another mother down on South Padre Island. Thank you very much, John. And we have Chill Herdinex Dan.
I think it's a School of Hard Knocks.
Oh, School of, okay, there we
Chucking
go.
it together.
Okay, School of Hard Knocks Dan. I never put that together. I've been seeing him for quite some time. Thank you, Will. $25 US. Thank you for the front row seats, Lab. You're most welcome, School of Hard Knocks, Dan.
And we have Conservative Space Nerd with a less than conservative $20 super chat donation. Says officially the largest rocket launched now, right? Well, yeah, I guess since they added the hot staging ring, it's a little bit taller than the last time they launched the integrated Starship. So yes,
Yeah,
it would be now the largest rocket ever launched.
We'll take it.
Thank you, Space Nerd.
All right, we have Sasha Shakalova, $20 US. So very close, and yet so far, the launch, the hot stage, all in place. This show was grand. The ship, the start. Too bad the show was lost in space. Thank you, Sasha. Yeah, she likes to give us some little poems every now and then on the live streams. Much love, Sasha.
Well, and having the name Will Robinson Smith, I will forever be linked to Lost in Space. So I will appreciate that one just in my heart. Thank you, Sasha. Mark Kidwell, $20 super chat, says, great job. Thanks for your commentary, and thanks to Lab for all his efforts in bringing this to us.
You're most welcome, Mark. Thank you. All right, we got Josh King with $9.99 USD. Definitely much better than the last flight. Congratulations to SpaceX. Go Starship. Yes, sir.
And thank you to Josh for being one of our channel members. Appreciate that additional support as well. HK with a $5 super chat, which it looks like I skipped and went by really fast. Apologies, HK, but thank you so much for your support. Really, really appreciate you being with us this morning.
All right, we got Don Rubottom with $19.99 US dollars. Thanks for all you do, Lab Padre. Well, thank you for hanging out with us and be a part of our community, Don.
Amanda Kahau with a $5 US super chat says, incredible work, guys, and hello, Marcus House. Love the great camera shots and the commentary of this amazing historical event. Keep up the great work. We certainly will. There's still lots more launch excitement left in 2023, and we're looking forward to bringing it all to you.
All right, we have SG. I think that's the second time we might have seen him today. $5 US. Thank you very much, SG.
SG is a silent donor. Not typically one to leave a comment, but really appreciate the support. SG is always a reliable partner coming in the chat. And speaking of being a great partner, AV Will with a very generous $50 super chat. Simple message. Great job.
Well, thank you very much. All right, we have Mel Roberts Harold with $1.99 USD. Doggone, missed this one. Oh, so sorry, Mel. Wish you could have watched it, but I'm sure we'll have it on a replay here.
Yeah, Mel is one of our regulars on the live streams, and she's very diligent, bouncing back and forth between the Cape as well as up in Chicago. So maybe in transit on the way for Thanksgiving obligations. So yeah, Mel, we'll have between our channels lots of replay opportunities. So be sure to check back for that. Son of Sofa Man with a $25 super chat just says, thanks for the great coverage and thanks for supporting us in this effort. Really appreciate that, Son of Sofa Man.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking forward to hitting a sofa soon because it's been a long night and morning between Starlink in the midnight hours and getting ready for this, but it's been fun. This is why we do it.
All right, we got Jolly Roger with $5 USD. Keep the root beer safe. It's always safe. I think it's time to get a keg this time.
The root beer taps, they will be a-flowing. Mel with another $5 super chat says, still appreciate y'all working to bring these to us. Certainly happy to do that, Mel, and I know we'll be back before you know it. As a matter of fact, there is a Vandenberg Starlink launch later on today, so no rest for the weary.
Oh,
yeah.
You have
one more mission on tap.
You have your hands full.
The fun never stops.
As I think we were saying earlier, as far as Florida time, this is going to be your third launch in one day.
Yeah. Yeah, just after midnight, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. And I think the Vandenberg launch is around, I have to double check. I think it's 8 o'clock-ish on the West Coast. So what would that be? About 11 p.m. Eastern time. So Really, really stretching the full length of that 24 hours. SpaceX is.
All right, we have Roy in the house with $2. Thank you, Roy, for hanging out with us. It looks like you're one of Space Flight Now's guys.
Master Race 1000 with a 900. Do you recognize that?
I don't recognize that.
Call that a 900 donation. Thank you for, says, great launch, great commentary. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a fun live stream.
Yes, sir. All right, we have Tex Drinkwater, $5. Thanks for the great coverage as always. Thank you for your generous support.
And with that last one, I believe that is all of the super chats for now. Whew, it has been quite the banner morning. You know, really notching another piece of history, as Stephen was saying earlier. You know, it feels very much like the era of Starship is not 100% firmly here, because we haven't seen them launch a payload yet, but they're well on their way.
Oh yeah, and you know, judging by what we see at the launch pad right now, not a lot of damage. I did see some debris fly, maybe even some debris that was glowing a little bit on Rover 2 cam. But overall, I don't think we had much damage. And with that being said, I think we're going to see something here in early 2024.
Certainly hope so. Obviously, we'll keep tabs with both SpaceX and the FAA as this mishap investigation gets underway and they process any updates that need to be made to the Starship vehicle that aren't already in work. Did have a couple super chats as we were chatting just now. Thanks to, I love this name, great reference to Jurassic Park there.